Mr. Attorney General, I think we have to start calling this what it was. And I know that the journalists that cover the Justice Department are duty bound to offer the most generous evaluation of what is emerging, the fact pattern. But we now have emails that prove that Donald Trump was directing his acting attorney general on the day Bill Barr left to overturn the results in 6 states. Do you have any doubt that he was seeking to remain in power?
Not at all. I mean, we know now, I think we knew this before, but we have emails to confirm it, that people at the highest levels of government were willing to do everything with the power they had to try and destroy our democracy, to put themselves and their own political interests before the interests of the American people. We see that. We know that. And clearly Donald Trump was orchestrating that.
I think it's important, too, Mitch McConnell's excuse for letting the big lie stand for so many months that ultimately a deadly insurrection came to pass at the Capitol building was, let's humor him. Let Trump be Trump. That was Kevin McCarthy's excuse as well. But it's clear that humoring him didn't work. We now know that the president, through an aide, the White House chief of staff, through his own emails, was directly pressing the most senior leaders of the Justice Department to stop the transfer of power. And I wonder where you come down in terms of what that says about what that Justice Department had become in the final days of the Trump presidency.
Well, Donald Trump tried to turn it into a tool of his own political whims. And there were many people there willing to carry that out. And there were many people in the White House willing to do the president's bidding. But our democracy was able to withstand Donald Trump, not without a lot of damage, but they were able to withstand it. And I think it's important, you noted the connection with the violent insurrection. There was a pattern that began with the lies that led to the litigation, that led to the efforts to disrespect the will of the people in my state of Pennsylvania and others, that led to the heated rhetoric, and now we know the attempts to use the Department of Justice to overturn an election here in Pennsylvania and in other states, and then ultimately leading to the violent insurrection on January 6th. There is a direct line that you can connect the dots in between each. And it is now that work that we need to do to speak truth, to try and come together, to clean up the mess from the big lie, which still exists today. And to do that work to repair our democracy that Donald Trump so damaged seriously.
I always like to sort of preface questions like the one I'm about to ask you by saying I am not putting this on the Democrats because they have blame. I'm putting it on the Democratic Party because they're the only ones interested in governing. And among the two parties, they're the only ones committed to the democratic norms that define our country.
Right.
I will say this. Had Hillary Clinton prevailed in 2016, and had we learned today in the New York Times and then in emails from the Judiciary Committee that she had Huma Abedin send an email to the acting attorney general asking the acting attorney general to overturn the election results in 6 states, there would be hearings right now. Republicans wouldn't wait a second. And my question to you is, do you think Democrats are moving quickly enough and with the urgency that this conduct requires?
I think Democrats certainly need to do more in Washington, and I do not think that we can normalize that behavior, and I certainly don't think that we can grow numb to it. Look, this was an attempt to overthrow the will of the people, to undermine our democracy, to engage really in a coup that ultimately became violent at the Capitol on January the 6th. I think it's important that we know what occurred. Obviously, Mitch McConnell is standing in the way of a commission to do that and to make sure that people are held accountable. And I realize that there may be some who say, oh, let's not spend our time on this. But I think as Democrats, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We should pass an infrastructure bill. We should pass a budget that invests in families. And at the same time, we should be trying to get to the bottom of what occurred. Because here's the deal. The cancer still exists, Nicole. And if we do not do our part to root out that cancer, with some honesty about what occurred and some truth-telling today, then that cancer will come back. Think of this, understand this, that the people who are leading the way in the Republican Party today, the modern-day GOP, indeed, the leaders here in Pennsylvania who are poised to be the nominees for statewide office, they continue to not just spew the big lie, but run on the big lie. And unless those issues are addressed today, it will continue to eat away at our democracy. We need some truth telling, and that work must be done.
Those Republican officials in the Commonwealth traveled to Arizona. We talked about that last time, or at least some of them, last time you were on this program. And you said that if they plan to stage a faux audit in the Commonwealth, they'll have to go through you. Where do those efforts stand, and how confident are you in your ability to stop what's happening in Maricopa County from happening there?
Well, first, on my confidence level, they sued us 42 times to make it harder for people to vote and to make it so votes didn't cast. We won every single time. I'll stand up and defend the will of the people of Pennsylvania, defend the rule of law, and I'll win. So I'm confident in our ability to speak truth and win in court if it comes to that. As to where things stand, who knows? I mean, they have these conference calls seemingly with Donald Trump. They huddle up, they make a lot of pronouncements, and then they haven't actually taken any legal steps yet. But make no mistake, if they try to bring that sham audit here to Pennsylvania, we'll be prepared and we'll fight back. And the reason is because we have had 2 legitimate legal audits already in Pennsylvania. Every single county has had one.
Right.
We have a safe and secure election, and the will of the people was respected and certified. And if anybody tries to undermine it again, like I said, they'll have to go through me. We'll continue to respect the will of the people and the rule of law, unlike others.